And how have things been for you these past couple of days?
Past couple of days, not too bad. We've been back for a while now, so we didn't work from home too long, but been busy, very busy.
Okay. Give me a sense of what it is that you do in your job.
Sure. So we have a substance use clinic on campus. A lot of people don't know that. So over in the Student Health Center on the third floor, there's a whole behavioral health unit.
Okay.
We have a team of, well, I lost one. We're getting one hired soon, I hope, but four of us, and then we have two doctoral students from the psychology program. So we provide substance use treatment to students, co-occurring as well. So if they have mental health, which typically there is, we can do long-term treatment with them.
Nice, nice. So I have training as a counselor.
I
If
saw that.
I was to come over there, what would my role be and how could I be supportive of you in that environment?
So I think, one of the biggest things we struggle with is people don't know that the office is here. And so a lot of times, CAPS is very visible. I think the stigma associated with mental health has gotten a lot better, but I don't think it has for addictions. And so
Okay.
I think trying to get people in the doors, right, and understanding that we don't use a punitive approach, we use a very non-judgmental approach. And I think when students get here and learn that, that's half the battle.
Okay. Okay. So most students come to your door because maybe they've been motivated to come, or are they coming seeking help on their own?
I would love that they came motivated. Many of them do, but we do get a lot from the off student conduct. So if they've gotten in trouble on campus,
Mhm.
DUIs, we do have some on probation as well.
Mhm.
We're able to see all those students to meet those legal requirements.
Mhm.
And then we do have a nice chunk of voluntary students that come in on their own. Readiness to change varies. I don't know how familiar you are with motivational interviewing. That's what we use here. And that's really a big part of addiction is kind of meeting the patient where they're at. And so that's really a big part of our philosophy in our office.
Okay, great, great, great. So how many people in your team is it just you who is doing this great work, or are there multiple
Oh no,
athletes?
too many students for it to be just me. So I have a team of four plus well, including myself, it's four. And then we have two psychology doctoral students that are in the psychology clinic. They come over here as well to help out and do training here so that they can get that substance use experience.
Okay, okay. So the pandemic has really caused people to have a lot of stress in their life. There's been a lot that has come because of it, right? The trauma that people are experiencing and re-trauma, right? The re-traumatization that is happening for folks. The people who are coming to see you, has a lot of it as of recent been because of the trauma related to the pandemic and all the things that are happening racially in the United States right now?
Yeah, it's definitely, but you've seen somewhat of a shift. And I think the teletherapy almost has helped some because some people who maybe wouldn't have accessed our services to come in person. I mean, I've had it sometimes students will tell me, I don't even like waiting in your waiting room because I don't want them to know I'm here for that. And our waiting room is very friendly. It doesn't say, substance use clinic on the front or anything like that. So it's not like it's someone would know that they're here for that, but that just goes to show you how hard it is for them to even just get in the door. So I think one of the blessings with COVID has been we never did teletherapy before. And so now we have this amazing opportunity to reach students who are going back home. As long as they're in the state of Florida, just because of licensure issues, I
Right.
can still keep up doing treatment with someone that's going home for the summer.
Okay, okay. So what does that look like ethics wise to be able to do that telehealth thing? What do you all have to do to comply?
Well, that's been a journey too, right? Because we're all learning, as we go with this COVID thing. At first, it was more so we started realizing, well, wait, if we have someone from out of state and they need to get their services done for conduct, how
Right.
do we can't do that because we're not licensed in those states. So the student does have to be in Florida at least. But really, it's been an easy setup as far as you just set up a Zoom appointment and you meet one-on-one. You certainly see more interesting things when you're in their home environment, but it also can be a positive as well. I personally like that we offer both. We're doing in person as well. So the student has that option to either do the teletherapy or do it in person.
So what led you to this career?
That's a good question. So, you know what? I initially thought I wanted to be in child welfare. So I did an internship locally, and honestly, it was so heartbreaking. I knew I couldn't do the work. It was all kids who were filtered in through physical abuse, sexual abuse. We were kind of the first child advocates that they saw in the county. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go completely opposite. And I did an internship at the addiction receiving facility over at the juvenile detention center.
Mhm.
And it really just took off from there. I mean, I do have a history of addiction that runs in my family. And so it certainly has always been a passion of mine to help people that struggle with this.
So it's really good to hear you say that because it's important to have self-awareness, right? 'Cause that's what happens to a lot of people when they start their career path, especially in the counseling and social work areas, right? People are like, oh, I'm going to go and I'm going to be this great savior and I'm going to help change the world. But then what happens is they get into these spaces and find out that it's a lot more that goes to this, right? It's about mind and wellness and all those things that come with it. And so it's really good that you caught that early because a lot of times people don't catch that, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's why, yeah, I don't mean to interrupt. I think that's why there's such a high burnout rate in our field. And you're familiar, you know, counsel ed background, having that. You know, I was grateful I learned that in an internship and not once I had already, you know, been in the field for a while. But there's a lot of people that, you know, don't ever want to work in addiction. They think it's, you know, it is hard work. You know, you're often working sometimes with people that don't want to make a change. And like I said earlier, you got to meet them where they're at and figure out, you know, where do we go from here?
So a lot of times people think that, you know, a college student is really a person who's binging, right? They don't really have a issue. They're just on a college campus and maybe they drink because they're hanging out with friends and so they binge drink and they do those different things. They don't really have a substance abuse problem. How often do those binging episodes actually really turn into a possible substance abuse issue?
That's a really excellent question because what a lot of people don't realize is, yes, people have that idea that they come to college and, you know, might drink heavy a few nights here and there, but there is a portion of those people, I don't know the percentage, that go on and that heavy drinking doesn't stop after college. And sometimes I come across those students as well because we do have students non-traditional that are, you know, maybe in their late 20s. I have patients in their 30s, and that has been the case that maybe, you know, college partying never really stopped for them as they got into an adulthood.
Right. And that really affects, how they do their coursework, how they matriculate through, the school in terms of that. Are there a lot of dropout rates? And if there are dropout rates from students, do you still help them to maybe till they get back on their feet so they can re-enter college?
Yes. So typically I'll try to encourage a student to do a medical withdrawal because it will get approved likely between the mental health and the substance use.
Okay.
And then they take a semester off. During that semester, I can still work with them.
Excellent.
And then the goal is as they're going through treatment, we want to get them either into a higher level of care during that semester they're off if they need a higher level, or we'll see them, continuously through the semester that they're not in school.
Right. So I know personally what it is, but can you explain what a Baker Act is and have you Baker Acted students and how do students need to understand that in terms of their
Sure.
well?
Sure. So, you know, when we start doing therapy, informed consent, one of the big thing we always tell a student right from the get-go is there are certain exceptions to confidentiality. And one of those is if they disclose they're going to hurt themselves or hurt others. I have done a few Baker Acts, certainly not as many as CAPS probably has to do, but we do have them from time to time, especially these dual diagnosis, individuals that are, they become suicidal. I would say I have a pretty high tolerance for risk level, but if there's intent with a plan, then we will do a Baker Act, which means involuntarily they're going to be taken to university behavioral centers where they're taken for us, but it's a residential facility. And there's usually a 72-hour hold where they're evaluated to make sure that they're safe to return to their home.
Yeah. And so during that evaluation period, they're kind of assessed for whether or not, not just suicidal, but they're propensity for alcohol? They learn their history, so to speak, like maybe their family history with alcohol and things along those lines?
Yeah, it's a pretty brief model. So I think they do a lot of groups. I know UBC locally, they do a great job doing DBT groups, dialectical behavioral therapy. And so I think it's more how much in this short time can we educate them and work on the front issue, get assessed to see if they're, and they'll usually do med checks as well. If there's any need for medications, they'll see a psychiatrist as well, potentially get medication or changes to their medication.
But you brought up group work. What's the difference in your mind between working individually with somebody and working with them? What's the benefits of working individually and or working in a group setting?
Yeah. So groups, I would say we know for addictions that group can be really beneficial. It's usually just getting the buy-in from the student to want to participate in that. And then individual, certainly more personalized. We do treatment plans, identifying what their goals are, having the opportunity to maybe address trauma, which there is a lot of that co-occurring stuff. So, but in a group setting, dialectical behavioral therapy, they have great groups, kind of skill-based that they teach, as well as, there's addiction groups. We have recovery groups as well. So AA, NA, those are on campus as well.
Okay, okay. And so you direct students to be able to do that, that AA work and things along those lines. So here's a strange question, right? So there's this Al-Anon aspect of it as well. So say, I'm just going to bring up this scenario. I don't know if it ever happens or if it's even something. So if it's something that you could smack me away with, just smack me away with it. But say there's a roommate situation where there's somebody who's having substance abuse issues and the roommate doesn't, but it's affecting the roommate. The roommate doesn't need that. Is there like an Al-Anon type of a situation for roommates that they can kind of learn to kind of deal with something? Because I can imagine that if you don't come from an environment where drinking has been an issue, and then you get into a roommate situation with someone who is having those types of alcohol issues or something along those lines, that you might need some support or help in that regards. Is there something in that lines as well?
Yeah, so we do have Al-Anon on campus. I wouldn't say it's more roommate based. Usually when those scenarios do come up, when it's roommate based, they'll seek out maybe some help from like a resident assistant on campus. That RA might reach out to student cares, or potentially it could be punitive if they get caught with something in their rooms. So that can be a little sticky, but they ultimately will make their way to our office, that roommate. So if a roommate's, concerned about that, I mean, I think student care services is a great way to reach out if they're concerned about, a roommate who might be using and they're not.
Okay. So I know that you have behind you these ducks that come from, the spirit splash and things along those lines. And so that might be an opportunity for people to drink and get into a lot of trouble. When you get an influx of students who are coming into your office, is it because of things like that are happening on campus, or is it just a steady stream of incidents that you're dealing with?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have our steadiness. That was an interesting impact this year was COVID. We didn't have tailgates, and we always have an influx of patients from tailgates. Okay. And again, that's usually they potentially maybe drank too much. They end up in our office. And we're really about educating students. We're not naive to the fact that they're not going to drink, right? Obviously, our hope is they choose not to until they're 21. But we're not going to come in and wave the finger and say, why are you doing this? So we really want to teach them safe ways. If they're deciding to drink, we start to educate them on standard drink sizes, pacing and spacing, using designated driver system, eating before you drink water, all those protection strategies to maybe they didn't think of. Yeah.
When I was in college, I won't tell you when I was, but I was always of the age when I could drink when I was in college.
Okay. So when it was 18?
Yeah.
Okay.
So on my campus, we used to have it where you can have cake parties and all those other things, right? So people.
Wow. Where'd you go to school?
I was up at UConn in the Northeast.
Oh, in the cold.
In the cold. So they had to have something to do, right? And so anyway, people would drink, right? And then, you know, some people never had drank before. And so there's this such thing as alcohol poisoning, right?
Yeah.
Because too much alcohol in their system. Do you have to deal with situations like that as well, and helping people kind of work through what has come from those types of situations?
Yes, absolutely. So what we've noticed is if we get medical transport, so we actually have a connection now with the people that manage the medical transport. So if there is one that's substance related, we call them, see if they want to come in voluntarily before potentially it could become punitive of some sort. We do have the medical amnesty policy on campus, which is nice because we want students to call for help, right? So I don't know how familiar you are with it, but if a student's passed out, often, you know, they're, especially in certain groups, they're worried they're going to get in trouble. So, you know, oh, I'm going to roll him on his side, he'll be fine, she'll be fine. That's
Yeah.
not always the case. And so that's part of, we do some psychoeducational work to let students know, hey, if you call, you're not going to get in trouble. We just want you to be safe, and teach them ways to do that.
So so just in case somebody's listening here, right, and they're in the middle of something like that, somebody is drinking and they, you know, what is a good procedure to do? Is rolling on their side a smart thing to do, or you know,
So yeah.
yeah, okay.
Typically, yeah, you want to roll somebody on their side. You know, and it's figuring out, do they need medical attention or not? If you're unsure, you know, always call 911. They'll arrive quickly and, you know, assess whether they need to be transported or not. But ideally rolling them on their side. If you're shaking them, saying their name and they're not responding, then that's a good indication they need medical attention.
Yeah. And so are there any after effects? Do you know of, I mean, what are some of the things that come from people who have had those types of situations? You know,
So,
I mean,
yeah, I mean, sadly, if they end up getting medically transported, they're going to have a hefty ambulance bill. So that's never fun for them and the parents.
okay.
Physically, you know, some of them come out and they've gotten an IV the whole time. So they wake up feeling great, but not remembering what happened.
Okay.
You know, and so I think sometimes it's putting the pieces together of, well, how can I stay safe in the future? You know, if I'm deciding to drink, am I with people that I trust? Am I setting limits? Because there's a lot to be, you know, aware of if you're deciding to drink in our community.
And there's probably cases where these people now that added to that trauma that there might be some type of assault that happens when you've been drinking that much and not aware of your surroundings.
Yeah, absolutely. Sadly, that, you know, that does happen. That happens at, you know, I think all college campuses, but I think we have a great support system on campus for people who are a victim of assault. You know, that we can connect them to and process that if they decide they want to do that.
Right, because I mean, I can imagine that not only are you helping them with this substance abuse issue, but if they are now dealing with the facts that, you know, they may have been abused in some way, that is also something that's actually a part of the conversation as well.
Right. Yeah, not remembering, I think too, for some, that's pretty scary to wake up and not recall the night before you end up in a hospital and, you know, you got to think about calling your parents and how do I have this conversation and what happened? And, you know, I think most times people they're with friends that they trust. But, you know, there are times where, you know, someone might have slipped something in somebody's drink and they didn't know it. And so that's part of our education too, is if you are deciding to drink,
Right,
always keep your you know, your glass in your hand, or if you're with a friend that you trust, have an eye on it, because if you go to the bathroom and come back, you don't know what could happen.
definitely that. So you brought up something about calling the parent, and that made me think of something. So if a person's a minor and this happens, the parent pretty much is already called, or is it still up to them to kind of let the mother and father or parent or the caregiver know what kind of situation they're in?
Yeah, so I believe if conduct's involved, they automatically will notify the parent. So at some point, they're going to be notified. Most students, I think, are so just traumatized from going through something like that that they're wanting to call mom and dad to, you know, say, hey, this is what happened.
And so somebody's 19 years old. I mean, I'm sorry. Somebody's 19 years old. I'm thinking about my age. Somebody's 19 years old and their parents don't know. There's a chance that you're going to inform them that they're incapacitated or hurt or harmed or something along those
Wouldn't
lines.
be
Does that change when they're 22?
Nope. So, I mean, it's really, I think it's part of our conduct policies. Michael Gilmer could probably speak better on that, but that if you have any involvement with conduct and you're medically transported, they're notified, whether you're a minor or not.
Okay, excellent. 'Cause, I mean, the onus is on the university to make sure that people are aware of what's happening at that point in time.
Yeah, and I think the student signs certain things that allow the university that if something does happen like that, to notify them.
Okay, okay. So do you get out into the residence halls, or do you all have programs that you set up and do that are preventative type things that are not necessarily associated with somebody coming when they actually have an issue?
So our prevention is more with wellness and health promotion services. They moved it over there, and so they do a lot of the outreach. Certainly, that's been a big challenge with COVID, trying to do outreach through telehealth or things like that. So I hope in August, I think once we see all our students come back, it's going to be exciting to see some of those events start to happen again. But we do an alcohol screening day around campus where we do what's called an audit C. And we do free giveaways if they do it. And audit C is assessing their risk level. That's where these little ducks come from.
Oh,
I wasn't in Spirit Splash.
no, I think it's usually, you get them because they tossed them out, not because you were trying to jump in the water.
Yeah, no, we do some outreach events where they give out these ducks. So they're always a popular event. But the audit C is an assessment of their risk level for their drinking.
Okay. So what does that entail? That type of a process.
Well, it's you set up these tables and you're hollering out, you want to fill out a survey, and someone might stop, someone might. Usually the ducks help and the t-shirts help, and we have them fill it out. We score it for them, and then we give them feedback on what their result means. So if they come back as a high risk drinker, it's broken into low risk, moderate, high, and very high risk. We talk to them about our services, ways they can reduce risk with drinking, similar to what I would do in my office, but in a really quick 5-10 minute spiel.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What's some of the joys of your job? What I mean, when you go home at night and you had a very successful day, what happens?
Well, the success is really on the patients. It's so kind when patients thank you, for the work you do, but really the work's on them. And I always remind them of that because this work is not easy. People that are in recovery, I have the utmost respect for because, it's an everyday thing for them. But some of the joys of my job, to go back to your original question, I would say seeing, students that graduate and have had, if I have the luxury of working with them a year or 2 years, seeing them get to that point of sobriety, seeing them, graduate. I just actually, right before we started, there was a student that called, I missed the call, and it was someone that graduated 2 years ago. I worked with him for a while and he put me through the ringer, but he was an amazing kid. And he calls me every few months and says, hey, I'm doing awesome. I have, 2 years sobriety. And
Nice.
those are the rewards, I think, when you hear from patients and see their successes.
That question because, as a counselor, I know that they're few and far between, right? Because we don't know what sometimes is the outlook or whatever has happened that for our clients or patients, whomever. And so a lot of times those rewards don't come. So it does help you because I think that is what stops people from having that burnout, right? It's like if every day you're constantly berated with this issue and that issue, and you think that, wow, this is all I'm seeing. But those moments that when somebody says, look, this is what you have benefited me with, me being able to see myself and change these behaviors is really an exciting part of it. And I think that helps kind of mitigate some of the problems that may have of a therapist anyway, when, they're like, wow, why do I do this every day? Why?
You're spot on because it is far and few between. And you do have those days where you're just exhausted and going, am I ever going to get through to this patient? Right. I will be lying if I didn't say I have a drawer full of cards that I've had patients over the years write me. And on those days that are a little tougher, I pull those cards out and remind myself why I'm doing what I'm doing.
That's good. Yeah, excellent. That's great.
Yeah.
Are there any other things you do for self-care?
I meditate. So that's another big one. You know, we teach these to our students. So I like to meditate, especially if you're having sleep problems, things like that. Or in the middle of the day at lunch, if you're, feeling frazzled. I used to walk the loop, the big loop on campus, on the days that it's not too hot on my lunch break.
I am the worst meditator.
Why do you say that?
Oh my God. I'm sitting there and I say, okay, I'm gonna go into a meditative state, and then I'm like, oh, I don't know what's in the refrigerator. Oh.
But you gotta redirect your brain back to your breathing.
I do, but it's like, but then again, like 5 minutes later.
That's normal though. That's normal. Have you tried a guided one?
Yeah, but know what's hard about the guided ones for me is that, especially the one that says, feel like your fingertips, right? Like, my fingertips, what are you talking, right? Now let it move up into your elbow. Those types of things. I'm like, what? What are you do?
Yeah, progressive muscle relaxation sounds like it, but I think, either people love meditation or they find it very challenging. So, I mean, if it's, I try that approach with some students and they either take it or they don't. And that's one of the things is being a therapist, not, one shoe doesn't fit everybody. So, sometimes
Creativity. We have to be able to think fast on your feet to be able to make things happen for the person. You can't get stuck in this, well, this is the way it's supposed to go, right?
Yeah.
Nice. So you meditate, you do other things. So when you need to get away, like when it says Calgon, take me away, what is that? What is the thing that you need to do with that? I mean, do you take a week off? How do you then take care of it?
So it's hard during the semester because, we try to limit how much time people take off. But funny you ask, because I recently just took off this past Friday and Monday and went to St. Augustine and ate all kinds of good food. And so I think making sure you take those days, and I really encourage that with my team as well, because it is a high burnout rate and they need those days for self-care, whether you stay home and do nothing or, whether you do plan a getaway to go somewhere.
And there are people who don't understand self-care in that regards.
Oh, yeah. We're fortunate here, I would say, UCF and the Student Health Center, they're really supportive of self-care, taking care of the employees and making sure that, we have that time, as we need it.
Yeah. So I think I directed a lot of my questions towards alcohol and things along those lines. What are some of the other types of substance abuse cases that you've seen on our campus?
Yeah, so I would say marijuana is right up there with alcohol. And I know, a lot of people have mixed feelings about marijuana, especially now that it's becoming legalized. We're seeing more of it being normalized. But, there's students that struggle with it as a daily addiction. A lot of people don't realize that you can have withdrawals. If I'm a daily smoker and I'm smoking every day, 5 times a day, when you stop that, you're going to be irritable, you're going to have night sweats, you're going to have trouble sleeping, you're going to have appetite issues. And so I think there's this kind of misconception of it, marijuana can't be addictive. It absolutely can. And I've seen it with our students who struggle with that. And so, it impacts school. They'll start to have low motivation, or maybe, their memory is not as great. And so I would say that's the second, alcohol and marijuana are the two top that, we see students for. We certainly have, stimulant, cocaine abuse, occasionally opiate, fentanyl, because we're seeing, unfortunately, the trend, not necessarily on campus, but in Orange County, when you look at the numbers of overdoses for, I think it was last year, it wasn't the opiate overdoses, it was fentanyl, because what's happening now is they're starting to lace things like cocaine with fentanyl. And so people don't realize it and are dying from it, sadly.
What is fentanyl?
So fentanyl is a very, I can't give you the numbers off the top of my head, but a very, very powerful opiate drug that they use actually like in surgery and stuff. And so if that's laced and you don't have necessarily a tolerance to opiates, so for example, if someone goes to get cocaine and it's laced with fentanyl, they could have an overdose.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And so I know there was a time when, what was really big was people who were doing, I forgot what they call it now. Oh Lord, when they will cook stuff up, what do they call it?
Oh, meth?
Meth. There you go. Is that a big thing now, or is that kind of played itself out?
I wouldn't say it's a big thing, but it's still there. It's definitely still there. Yeah. So occasionally I'll get somebody.
So a lot of times people say marijuana use kind of is the gateway to people kind of stepping up their game and hitting like cocaine and all these other different spaces, right? Um, is that something that you're finding to be true, or if are people trying to find that best high? What does that mean? What does that look like?
Sure.
Because I was listening to an interview the other day with Hunter Biden.
Oh, yeah.
And he's got I guess a new book or something going out. So he's on this little tour, and he was saying that his first high is never as his highs after the first one that he ever had.
Yep.
That everybody's always chasing.
Chasing the high. Yeah. So, and that really happens with opiates, and that's why you see people that just really cannot get off that that cycle of chasing that high, because as the person's building tolerance, they're looking to either increase the amount they're using, right? And that's when someone who maybe is abusing opiates will start to go to fentanyl, because fentanyl is like the ultimate high. And so it's no different though with marijuana, right? If I'm smoking 3 times a week, my tolerance starts to build, and I'm going to 5 times a week. Before you know it, I'm smoking how many grams a day?
Right.
And same with alcohol or any other drug.
So the mind game then when people are searching for this high, because I'll be honest with you, I don't do drugs, so I have never really ever had that situation. But it intrigues me to hear that somebody is chasing a high. So you're really trying to get that very first experience you ever had. And then so because you didn't get it with that one, then you're willing to do it again and do it
Yep.
again, do it
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. And then the physical piece starts to happen, right? So if I'm not getting the same high that I want and I start increasing the use, you start to become addicted to the substance because your body wants more of it, right?
Right. And so you think that you're doing it because you're trying to get to this best high. Your body is saying now you're addicted.
Yeah, that and sadly sometimes, especially with opiates, it leads to an overdose or a death. And that's one of the reasons, we educate if we have any students that are abusing opiates on Narcan, which I'm not sure if you're familiar, but it reverses the effects. So if we have somebody that struggles with an opiate addiction, we try to make sure they know where they can get Narcan, make sure a family member or someone they live with has that, because it'll reverse the effects of the overdose if you catch it within a certain window.
Okay, and I don't know what that is, but it's some type of a medication of some sort.
Correct. Yeah.
And so you got people who are doing these types of things, and they're addicted now, and they don't necessarily realize that they're addicted. Um, what are the ways that you help them kind of see it? You know what I mean? When they're coming to you with denial, how do you help them kind of see that there's an issue? Because most people, if they're in denial, they're not going to change, right? Because
Right.
you're telling them.
Well, first I got to get them in the door here, right? So the problem has had to have gotten bad enough that they're willing, unless they're forced to by probation or conduct,
Right.
we got to get them in the door. And so usually at that point, there's been some type of consequences enough that they were like, wow, I need to seek out, this is beyond just myself. I need to seek out professional help. That's not always the case. We certainly have people that are in that pre-contemplation stage of change that are, I don't think I have a problem. I don't know what you're talking about.
Mhm.
Right. And so for those, students, I have to meet them where they're at. So if I can get, it sounds funny, but if I can get someone who's drinking daily to maybe drinking only on the weekends and limiting the amount to a safer level, that's success in our eyes. We use a harm reduction approach. Now, I don't do that with opiates because that might be a little higher level of care, but we do try to meet them where they're at. If they're absolutely not getting the buy-in to maybe work on abstinence, I try to meet them on a reduction plan.
So are therapists ever seen as co-conspirators? And when I say that, like, so you just said something that made me think of this, right? If I try to get them to do less, am I complicit does the law see me as complicit when I know this person is doing drugs and I'm holding confidentiality in place so that they can get better? But
Yeah. Well, I think again, though, but if I'm looking at the pros and cons, are they able to live a more fulfilling life, get their school done, get their work done? Yes, they may still be using, but are they using less that they can function in their day to day? I mean, to me, that's a success in my book. If I can get someone who's smoking daily all day, not going to class, not going to work, and they can reduce their use enough to limit it to where they're going to work, their grades are getting up there, then who am I to judge that they need to completely stop? And if I told them to completely stop and they weren't ready to, they'd be like, bye, I'm not coming back here again.
yeah. And so I can imagine also then that maybe on top of the substance abuse issues that they have, they're also maybe running into financial issues as well.
Oh,
Money
absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
along those lines, but those must kind of mesh together as well, right?
Yeah, the amount that could be spent is, shocking at times. And that's one of the things we look at. A lot of students, they don't want to, I'll say, well, how much are you spending, a day on purchasing marijuana? And they're like, oh, I don't know. Well, I'll have them sit down and add up, day one, day two, all the way through seven. And when they see that number for the month, it's like, kind of mind blowing because they don't want to think about that.
Is that something enough to make them stop or halt?
It may not, no, that's part of it. That's part of it. It's not enough to make them stop, but if you're looking, we kind of do cost benefit analysis. What are the pros and cons of
Right,
making a change?
right,
That's one of the things to highlight is, well, how much are you spending on this a month, right?
right. And also, how much are you getting in debt from it too, right? Because there's always these scenarios where I don't have the money to pay for this, but I'm going to go get this person who's supplying it, and then they get into more trouble because then they have to figure out how they're going to pay this, right? And I can imagine that then leads to maybe some petty theft or this or that or all of those things that come in regards so that you can continue to get that high.
Right. Yeah, I would say petty theft is or stealing from relatives, unfortunately. And that's how some people end up, with legal trouble. And I think it's a good thing that our office can work with probation or pretrial diversion to help those students still be able to function in school, but get their legal sanctions, taken care of as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I mean, so we just talked about so many different things. Your job is multifaceted,
It's what?
multifaceted,
Yep.
right? So it's not only that you are dealing with substance abuse, but all the different things that kind of tail off of it, right? And so you have to kind of be able to really utilize all of your brain space to help, because I mean, it may be that you got the substance abuse and you got problems at home. You got substance abuse, and then there's there might have been a sexual abuse case. You have the substance abuse, and somebody is facing jail time because they robbed someone. All of those things are part of helping them heal themselves, and as they try to get over the addiction.
Right. Yeah, no, it is definitely a lot of case management too. I'm talking to parents a lot if they want, if the student allows me to, sign a release so that I can talk to them. So sometimes it's calming parents who are very worried about their child, rightfully so. Sometimes it's talking to a probation officer. We do events on campus in the residence halls as far as just it's through Zoom right now, but educating all the RAs on our services, what to look for, things like that. So it is a nice mix.
Yeah. So maybe I'll ask it a little bit differently. I think I kind of asked some of this. So you must have a case that was the most successful that you felt was so that you did your best work and this person just shined through and just got on the other side of it. Can you talk a little bit about what that case was?
Yeah, I mean, without, excuse me, breaking any confidentiality, but yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, thinking about someone that maybe had some trauma and I worked with them for over a year, because as you know, these things don't happen in short-term therapy, but seeing them abuse pretty much what we used to call polysubstance, they don't call it that anymore, but polysubstance abuse, abusing everything under the sun, had some sexual trauma as well. Being able to see this person go through all of these things that, a lot of times they're terrified to address. And so even just getting them to that point of being able to talk about some of these traumas. And a lot of it's what we call complex trauma, I'm sure you're familiar with, but layers and layers of trauma, right? So then you're trying to figure out, well, which one, where do we start to address this? And so for me, those are some of my most rewarding cases. There is somebody that comes to mind that had those, complex traumas, and that they have been abstinent now for a pretty long time, close to graduating. And so, and appreciative of the work we do here too is always nice, because sometimes people don't want to be here.
Yeah, and I can imagine that being the case because, again, like you said, there's a stigma that's attached to it, and also people feel as though people are pointing their finger at them, right? Everybody knows that I have this issue, right? And so
Yeah.
try to hide it or mask it.
It's also very rewarding when you get those mandated students that don't want to be here and they realize they're not going to be waving the finger, and you build that rapport and they're like, wow, this lady's not out to get me, and you see them succeed. Those are pretty cool too, because you're like, wow, they didn't want to be here when they first got here. Now look at how they're doing.
And a lot of times they don't want to succeed because they're mad at what has occurred to get them outed, so to speak.
Right.
Not that they want the change that's necessary.
Right.
So I used to work with a program, and I'm not in substance abuse, but when I was doing my training, I did work with substance abuse.
Okay.
Master's program. But I remember when I was I was a college co-ed, and on the summers I worked with these programs, and this one program was called the Health Science Cluster Program. And so there's these high school students that were coming onto campus during the summer. We put them up in housing in the residence halls, and we were helping them kind of learn the ropes of how to become a college student from that perspective. They were taking science courses and all these other things. And so these students were doing things. We were in a residence hall, because think about this, we were on an 8-story residence hall. We had the students all on one level, right, or two levels. We had I think we had a male floor and a female floor at the time. And so, but not knowing that they were sneaking away. I mean, I didn't have that knowledge base. They were sneaking up to the top floor and getting.
Oh boy.
And so I remember having conversations when I found out that they were getting high, having conversations with them. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? You don't have to do this, because I never did drugs, and I was like trying to steer them away from that and trying to make them see differently, right? But they were all like, you're just a corny kid. Get away from me, whatever. I was the problem, right? I was the person who was the person who was the buffoon, so to speak, because I was trying to stop them from using these. For them, they were just doing marijuana, right? And so I remember some years later, the student was now a freshman at the university and came to me and said, thank you. I didn't listen to you. I thought you was a knucklehead and then you whatever.
Aww.
But I stopped. And then they went into pharmacy.
Wow. See, it's funny. I always say you're planting a seed, and I tell my team this, that you may feel like you're not getting through somebody, again, that person that's in that pre-contemplative stage, but you know what? Not every story is going to be a success story. You're going to have students that do drop out of treatment, and you wonder, you make those calls hoping you're going to reconnect. But sometimes you see them again, and I tell them that, because you are planting a seed. Just what you described, the perfect example of that.
Yeah, and those are the rewarding things that come after you. I didn't think anything of it anymore after the students left that summer and whatever have you, but to have somebody come up to you and say you had an influence in terms of how they now have kind of changed their life. And I think, the funny part about it is, before I ever thought about being a counselor.
So right? What brought you into counseling?
Oh Lord, what happens? That's a long story. Actually, I think life brought me into counseling, to tell you the honest goodness truth. I was working as I graduated with a communications degree, and I was working working in that realm. But then I got a job working in an African American cultural center, and working in this center on the college campus, I was seeing all kinds of students, first generation students who were having financial aid issues, students that were homesick, all those things. And in my role, I was essentially, without a skill base, counseling.
Okay.
And so one thing led to the other. And
Yep.
then I started to look for a master's program. At that point, I only had a bachelor's degree.
Mhm.
Uh, it kind of fell into that. And
Very cool.
that's how I became a counselor. Yeah.
Very cool.
So I think sometimes our life pathway leads us to doing things. And so you got to be open to being able to recognize really where your strengths are, what it is that you can do. So
Yeah.
but as far I feel like I've been counseling for a long time. But again, I also tell people, yeah, and I was also counseling without the skill, right? I was doing what I thought was best for people. And that's when, as you know well, we're not supposed to give advice. We can only support you through your journey. It's your journey. You're the one that has to really make a decision whether you're going to make a change or not. I
Right.
can help you. I can only push you enough to kind of give you some more insight into your behavior and your actions and what you can do to change those. So
Right.
one thing.
It's true.
So you give your space some advertisement. What is your space? What do we need to tell the UCF community about what you all offer so that there isn't trepidation? So that people.
Yes. I love it. So, as I mentioned, we're on the third floor of the health center, right next to CAP. So we're on the behavioral health unit, which is also psychiatry and dietitian. And so, really just that we use a non-judgmental approach. We're not looking to, again, wave the finger and scare people away. We're going to meet you where you're at, whether that's a substance use addiction or a process addiction. I mean, one of the other things we didn't really touch on is gambling is an issue. Sex addiction, video game addiction.
Yeah. I had a student when I was working at when I was teaching on campus. We have also a clinic, free clinic over in the College of Education, and there was a student who had a porn addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm assuming that you're seeing things like that as well. Then.
Yeah, and especially this day and age with iPhones. I mean, the instant access, and so we'll assess them, see if they're appropriate for services here. But either way, get them connected to who they need to see to work on those things. So certainly, don't hesitate to call and schedule an appointment. Like I said, a lot of people don't know we exist on campus, and sometimes how it ends up happening is they'll go to CAPS and then CAPS does the assessment, recognizes, okay, this is more substance use, and then they send the referrals over to us, which is a nice relationship we have.
And so you're only dealing with students, or are you dealing with faculty and staff and administrators, or how does
Just,
that?
just students.
Yes, the students.
We have enough business with just students right now.
All right, all right. Well, any other last minute things that you want to share about what you all do?
Like I said, we do the substance use treatment. We also have neurofeedback here. One of our team members does neurofeedback. So if you struggle with anxiety, that's something that's a great option. And then we have a drug take back event coming up on April 23rd. So
Okay.
just to kind of be aware of that. I don't know if
Now, that entail the drug take back.
So, one of the things we've kind of learned is when people first experiment with prescription drugs, whether that's a sedative or an opiate, we know that they find it in a friend or family member's medicine cabinet. And so every year we participate, Student Health Services, with the police department, no questions asked, and you can return any unused medication. Some people flush their medication. That's not great for the environment. So we'd rather you bring it in so that way you don't have old medication laying around. They're going to be set up April 23rd over near the Chick-fil-A entrance over near the Union.
Oh, okay, excellent. So
Yep.
there's a lot of stuff going on our campus that we should be aware of.
Yeah.
And so those are things that are widely advertised. But then your services, because of the nature of what you bring, it's harder for you to kind of market that, I would assume.
Yeah, and I've had, it's funny, I had a student recently that said, he just randomly called and said, do you treat gambling? And I said, well, yeah, we have a place that you can come in and we do process addictions. And they really brought it to our attention that we didn't have that on our website, that we did process addictions because we had so focused on the substance use piece. And so I was so grateful that, the student had reached out because it highlighted something of, okay, maybe this is something else we need to have on our website. And that particular student talked about what a barrier it is it's just scary to even pick up the phone and call our office, right? And so I think making that stigma as much as we can that, you know, we're not gonna point the finger and we're here to support, you know, students in a very non-judgmental way.
Yeah, and I can imagine that, again, being in a building that has other things going on, that people still would think that because of all the other things that are going on in the building, that everybody's going to know when I walk through this door that I'm what I'm walking through that door for.
And I think that's why we've changed it to, we used to be called Alcohol and Other Drug Office. So we now are in the behavioral health unit. We're still called Substance Use Disorders Clinic internally, but there's no signs out there. It says behavioral health. So I could be here to see the dietitian. I could be here to see psychiatrists. We have other doctors in the building for primary care. So I think if that's one of the barriers we try to make it as welcoming, you know, as we can.
And you said you have about 5 staff members altogether?
Yes. Yep.
And you're hiring someone new?
Well, I'm including the one we're hiring. Yeah.
Excellent. And so those who are working there, how are they supervised?
Well, so the ones that are licensed, we do supervision every other week, and I just check in with them on any high risk patients that I want to have on my radar. And so we staff those cases, and then the doctoral students that we have from the psychology clinic, I oversee their supervision with one of the psychologists over there as well, review their notes, make sure they're writing, you know, the proper things in the note taking. And then we staff cases as well every week that they're seeing.
And are there internships for like master's level students or anything like that? Or are you guys not equipped for that kind of work?
They're actually working towards becoming a psychologist. So they're working towards they already have their master's and they're working on their doctorate.
Right, but I'm thinking about counselors. I mean, do you bring in other disciplines? Like, so if there's so we have a counselor education program where we have people who are going into substance abuse work and addictions and things along those lines. Could they be interns in your facility?
We do, I believe, still have an MOA with counselor ed program. Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I really appreciate having the opportunity to talk with you. You kind of expanded my brain space anyway with some of this stuff.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me. It was nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. So now I got to figure out how I can get over there and get a duck or two.
Yes, we have to talk to the marketing department. We can get that for you.
See, nobody wants to give up their ducks. No.
I know. I don't know what it is.
Anyway, so thank you so much, and we'll do everything in our power to support you and help and send people your way.
Appreciate it.
Comes along. So,
appreciate it. It was my pleasure.
So I know that on this coming Friday, and it's just a message out to the community here, we're hoping to have someone here to just kind of talk about the things that have been going on in the country, especially since the trial and the verdict coming in, and just kind of how people can kind of heal themselves, regardless of how this has all come about for them and how they see the case. So, so we're hoping to kind of bring some conversation to that on this Friday. So
that's great.
Thank you, Megan. It's really nice to again meet you. I hope that this wasn't too much of a hardship for you to kind of come and talk about this, but
no, not at all.
I see your energy, and I'm just hoping that people come your way. And so you have a great rest of the day. And
thank you. You too.
Again soon.
All right. Bye.
All righty.